Hey guys, good afternoon and welcome to the CNBC TV18 Mumbai studio. I'm Pavitra, with me is Sonal and you're watching MF Corner. This is actually our first episode in the new year. So first of all, here's wishing all of our viewers a very, very happy 2024. And you know, a new year is always a good time for a fresh start, right? So today we're going to talk about how you can start to plan your finances and how you should think about all of your money goals and also then prioritizing these goals. Sonal, there is something about the start of a new year, right? That makes you more motivated to look at all these things.
And we take on new tasks, and the biggest task, of course, would be managing your money. So let's do that. On that note, let's welcome Mrin Agarwal, who's the financial educator and director at FinSafe India. Mrin, thank you so much for joining us and wishing you a very happy new year as well. You know, that is exactly the first question. Take us through how you would go about planning your finances. What are the key steps to follow when drawing up a plan?
So good afternoon and a very happy new year. And thank you for having me on this first show of MF Corner this year. Well, I think firstly, when you're planning, for your finances, what we normally see is that people tend to invest in a very ad hoc manner based upon what's doing well. So when small caps were doing well, everybody is going into that. Now, of course, there's this trend to get into large caps, right? So the first thing, of course, is that whenever you have any amount of money to invest, it always has to be invested based on a goal, because that's when you will choose the right instrument. So, for example, let's say you get into equities thinking that it's a great time to invest, but if you only have a 2 to 3 year time frame, it may or may not work out in your favor because of the volatility involved. Similarly, when you save for retirement, I see a lot of people tend to get very conservative and look at very low returning products, which are not really suitable to build retirement corpus, right? So basically, excuse me, the wrong choices means that you may not really have enough. And to just give a small example again of retirement, for example, let's say, you're retiring in the next 10 years and you have 50,000 that you can invest. And if you actually put this money in a fixed deposit and we assume a 5.5% return, you're going to end up with something like 80 lakhs, right? But if you choose your instrument right, and let's say, you get into an equity instrument where we are assuming a 12% return, you're actually looking at a 1.15 crores as the corpus. So there is a huge difference in the corpus based upon the product that you choose, and that has to be based upon a goal so that you know what you can actually choose in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, and this is so true, right? That you often see this where people are investing and then you kind of walk back and say that, okay, I've invested this amount, now let's see what I can do with it. But that might end up in you having to compromise your lifestyle or other such things. But Mrin, what are the goals that you think everyone should have and save for through the course of their life, right? So, I mean, everyone from a young person to maybe someone in their 50s, 60s.
Well, certainly retirement is the first goal that everybody needs to have, because one, you need to save for the time that you're not going to be working. Of course, there are no loans available at retirement for you to lead your life, right? And again, the retirement goal today is not only about the day-to-day expenses, it's also about taking into account what you will need to keep yourself mentally engaged, and also your fun expenses. I mean, those have now become essential expenses for retirement as well. So it's not only about having this goal, but getting this goal right as well. Of course, if one has kids, then kids' education is a big goal these days with all the costs involved. And whether we like it or not, most parents still do want to save for the marriage goal as well. Of course, buying a house is another common goal in the short term. Some of the newer age goals that you have now could be like, doing that real experiential vacation that you've been wanting to do all your life, or for example, wanting to buy a luxury car, which could be much beyond your means. But I do see these as goals that the younger generation wants to pursue.
No, we take that point, and there are so many of them. And as you said, it's not getting any cheaper to actually get through your wants or the luxuries in life as well. But you did indicate that first should be retirement. But anything other than that, any order you think people should look at in order to work on the goals that you mentioned?
So, of course, after allocating for retirement, I think one should look at prioritizing goals that are coming up in the short term. And where there is a shortfall as well, because you certainly do want to meet these particular goals. And so I think that should be really the focus area, to look at goals which are coming up soon, and where there may be a shortfall, you might want to look at allocating more. But honestly, Sonal, I would also say that there is no right or wrong in this. It really depends upon the individual, what is really important to them. And they could also, like, for example, if they have two goals, a goal in coming up in 5 years, let's say home purchase, versus a goal coming up in 15 years, they could actually decide to maybe allocate to the longer term goal if they find that to be more important. So I don't think that there's any right or wrong in this. It really depends on the individual. Also, how much you allocate. So I believe you should allocate to retirement whatever is required. And then the balance amount is really up to you, how you want to allocate. You allocate more to one, you allocate lesser to the other. That really depends upon personal preferences and comfort.
Okay, got that. That is helpful. But Mrin, for someone who's starting out, who's maybe in their 20s, they're likely only investing a small amount, right? Maybe 1,000 rupees, 5,000 rupees, and it may not be practical to sort of split that corpus into separate funds for retirement, home, education. So what would you suggest someone do here? And, how should they go about it?
Well, firstly, they should get the instrument right. And nowadays, of course, with the markets doing well, again, we're seeing a lot of interest in F&O, a lot of interest in trading as well. The main thing is to choose a good fund and stick with it. It may not be the most exciting investments, but I think investments are not supposed to be exciting. And I think a simple index fund is going to work. So I think one is really about getting the instrument right. Now, at a young age, you probably have one goal, of course, retirement, and maybe you have a home purchase goal, right? So you could decide to kind of split it up. You could decide to keep it in one place. It really depends upon what is the investment instrument that you're going to choose for it, right? For example, if you're going to choose NPS for retirement, and then you decide on mutual funds for the rest of the goals, then of course it's going to be separate. Again, here, there's no right or wrong. It really depends upon your ability to save for this goal and your ability to track this goal. And of course, both the goals have to be in sync as well, right? So they have to be for a similar period. So if you have one 5-year goal and one 25-year-old goal, then obviously you'll have to look at different instruments.
Okay, so, when we talk about different instruments, we often see people saving and investing in good funds. That would be one mutual fund instrument or asset class that people look at. But without a clearly defined goal, they are like, okay, let's just allow money to grow in mutual funds, but we do not know what it would be used for as long as that money is growing. What do you think of that approach?
Yeah, I don't prefer that approach, because, the biggest problem in ad hoc investing is that you really don't know when to exit, right? And then you have situations like 2020, where, for example, a SIP that was giving you, let's say, 12-13% return almost gave you a CAGR of 1% because the markets had a drastic fall, right? So the problem is that when you invest without having a clearly defined goal or a time frame, you really don't know when to exit, and you don't know what to do at volatile times. That's the other issue. So it doesn't really work out, in the long term, and then you end up taking decisions based on market movements only.
No, I mean, it sounds okay, like initially when you hear about it, that fine, you're allowing your money to grow in a good fund, but I guess it takes such an incident to really throw you off. Mrin, very interesting chat. We have a lot more questions also in terms of, what you should do if you have some kind of debt, if you've taken a loan. We're going to take a short break, come right back, and we're going to continue our conversation with Mrin Agarwal. Stay tuned.
Welcome back. You're still tuned into MF Corner. We are discussing everything about drawing up a financial plan for the new year. We have with us Mrin Agarwal, financial educator and director at FinSave India. When Mrin, we spoke about what could the goals be, what would the hierarchy be. But tell us, what if you have some debt, say your own education loan? Do you always pay it off completely before you start to invest for any other goals? And if you are in a position to be able to prepay a car or a home or an education loan, should you do it and postpone investing for other goals?
It's of course very situational, but I do believe that firstly, it cannot be completely either or that. I would always say have a good balance. do your investments at the same time, keep ensuring that your loan is within limits. So one of the things that we always advocate is to have about less than 30% of your take-home income going into EMIs, right? And we just did some numbers to see how it really works out, and you'll be surprised to know. So let's assume that somebody has got a 10 lakh rupee annual salary, and there's one person who's got a loan and has a limited amount, let's say about 30% of the income going as EMI, and the other person has a larger loan and thus has about 50% of the income going as EMI, right? So typically what you actually will find is that, when the EMI is a very large percentage of your take home, then what you're going to find is that actually the interest costs compound so much that they actually eat into any investment returns that you might have. And think about it, 30% going to EMI versus 30% only going to investments, right? That's the trade-off, right? So when you have a lesser amount going into investments and a larger amount going into EMIs, what you're really going to see is that the the interest is really going to compound, right? And this is interest that you pay. Unfortunately, it's not interest that you earn. And that is why it is really important that if you do have some amounts to prepay, or if you have some amount, and this question comes to me very often, that I have some amount, should I prepay my loan or should I invest? Because it seems that there is an arbitrage where markets are giving better return than what my loan rate is at. But honestly, it is not a simple arbitrage because markets do not give linear returns. And I would always say that when you actually do the math, you'll find that yes, certainly if you invest that amount, it's going to show you a better return, but the returns are not linear. Mm-hmm. And hence, I would always say try to prepay as much as you can, because you bring down the interest. And you, of course, bring down the tenor of the loan, and that allows you to get debt-free earlier.
Yeah, I mean, and there's no price that you can put on that, right? I mean, I think the mental freedom that it will give you as well. But Mrin, that calculation really helps that you showed us, so thanks for that. But the other question I have is that we're talking about these big goals, right? Retirement, saving for a child's education. Are mutual funds always the best way to save for these? Because you do have really good government schemes like the Sukanya Samriddhi, the National Pension Scheme. What do the returns look like when you compare it with equity?
So, of course, everything really depends upon what your long-term goals are and how long-term your goals are. Of course, for shorter-term goals, you can look at debt mutual funds. But I think when you're looking at long-term goals, and again, things like children's higher education goal, and while Sukanya Samriddhi is a great investment, I always believe that if we have to keep up pace with the inflation on these particular goals, you certainly need to have a good amount of equity allocation. So while the Sukanya Samriddhi is a great scheme for child education, I would always say have a good allocation, and by good I would say at least 50% into equities. And that is because the inflation on child education today goal is 10%, right? So if you have to beat that number, you do need to have equities in your portfolio in a very good percentage. Now, as far as retirement is concerned, because that's another long-term goal, I think, the choice, both instruments are really good. The NPS is a great instrument. If you look at the 5-year returns, it's been about 13 to 15% sort of returns in the past. Of course, this is CAGR, not rolling returns. So I think NPS is a good choice. And for those who really don't want to have the lock-in or do not desire to have pension in retirement, of course, you do have a wide variety of mutual funds also available that can be considered. So while the government schemes are really good, somewhere, obviously, to meet these long-term goals, and you need large amounts, you need to have equity allocation, a good amount of equity allocation. And of course, the choice between NPS and equity is really about the liquidity and the pension.
Okay, all right. So in that case, what are some mistakes to avoid when planning for long-term goals? Something that everyone must take care of.
So again, being too conservative, right? I see, again, within NPS, for example, most people just go in for the moderate option, or, they choose the option with higher amount of debt, or people typically tend to rely on fixed income instruments for retirement as well. So that is one issue. And the other thing, and I think this is the bigger issue, is not knowing what is the right amount to invest. So I see a lot of surveys on retirement saying that, people have started saving for retirement and there's a vast number of them. But, a lot of times what you will actually find is that most of them are using like the mandatory investments like EPF, and that may not be actually sufficient. So while people are doing something, the bigger issue is, are you doing the right amount?
Okay, that's definitely important to watch. Mrin, we've spoken so much about setting goals, investing, picking the correct plan. How do you ensure that you stay committed to your goals? Because that is, you're looking at a very long period and it's very easy to sort of fall off.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I recently had someone who asked me, I want to move my entire PPF portfolio into equities because equity is giving double-digit return. And I think, these are the sort of mistakes to really avoid, that don't jump into a product just because you've seen some good short-term performance and just because you see everybody around you choosing this particular products. So even things like I have, people have asked me, should I borrow and put money into gold or stuff like that? And I would just say stick to your plan, stick to your investments. Do not try to churn your portfolio too much.
It's not always a sprint, sometimes it's a marathon, right? So we have to be very disciplined about our investments as well. So when we talk about investing for goals, but how does one manage withdrawal of goals? Because that is also something important to track.
Yes, absolutely. So again, to avoid a 2020 sort of a situation where a SIP with a 13% CAGR got down to almost 1%, you don't want to be caught in situations like that. So 1 to 2 years before the goal, it is very important that you look at what is the value of your investment and try to move out as much as you can into a safer product so that you can basically safeguard that particular corpus. Even if you've not really reached your goal number, try to see if you can move some amount out just to safeguard it. Of course, at the time of withdrawals, you must remember that you still have other financial goals to complete. And so you mustn't lose focus of those other financial goals as well. And, ensuring that all the basics like your emergency cash, the right amount of life and health insurance, all of these things also need to be in place when you are having those withdrawals, because if there is some sort of contingency, then the family needs to be able to fall back on this.
Okay, you do need that security. Mrin, I think it's been a very helpful chat, and I'm glad we did this as the first episode of the new year with you on really tackling what is step one, right? Deciding that you want to plan all of your finances and then getting into setting goals. Thanks a lot for joining us today and taking us through this complete, complete detailed plan on how you can go about it. With that, we're going to wind down on this edition of MF Corner. Thank you all for tuning in. We have closing bell coming up after this short break to take you through the final hour of trade today.